So are we ready to go? Probably yes. It's 6:30, so we can start our meeting. So ladies and gentlemen, good morning or good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. I am Paola Manoni from the Vatican Library, co-chairing the IIIF Discovery for Humans community group. I'm so delighted to open this workshop focusing on the, let's say, dilemma of discovery of IIIF compliant resources by humans, and to welcome all of you. The IIIF APIs have been used since 2012 by the community to create compelling software for the display of more than 1 billion IIIF compatible images. As it is well known, institutions making use of the open IIIF standards include world-leading institutes, national and state libraries, archives, museums, software companies. We can say we have a great variety of provenances of those images related to a multitude of digital resources floating through the web galaxy. But a fundamental problem is still that of discovering images and the availability of their related manifests. We can figure out that with hundreds of institutions participating worldwide, the possibilities, for instance, for IIIF-based scholarship are growing. So one question could be about the discovery of those images relevant to one's research interests in order to discover them for their consultation, comparison, or even more for their use. While the IIIF specification discussion has focused on the machine-to-machine mechanisms of making IIIF resources harvestable, we have yet to implement an end-to-end solution that demonstrates how discovery might be accomplished at scale and across a range of differing standards for metadata arising from libraries, archives, and museums. This is a big challenge. 2 years ago, when Mike Keller and Tom Kramer invited me to participate in the International Image Interoperability Framework Discovery Workshop at Stanford, my first imaginative flash about the searchability of this huge patrimony of images came out from a book of memoir entitled West with the Night by Beryl Markham, a nonconformist adventurer, racehorse trainer, as well as writer. This charming lady, English-born, Kenyan aviatrix, the first person to fly solo, non-stop across the Atlantic, had a strong critical and ironic sense of life. In this book, she describes the vastness of Africa seen from her biplane in search of male elephants. Unfortunately, at that time, the 30s of the last century, the concept of safari was not limited to photos. But in this book is also about many challenges. So at a certain point of this memoir, there is a paradox, a kind of paradoxical statement. The way to find a needle in a haystack is to sit down. We have to sit down first if you want to face a big challenge. So in both metaphorical and concrete sense of this quote, we sat down in that workshop at Stanford in order to discuss about the discovery of IIIF resources in the IIIF haystack of data and images produced so far. One of the consequences of that meeting was the establishment of the Discovery for Humans community group, aiming at advancing the discovery. It means human searching, browsing and finding of IIIF resources across institutions in the library's archive museum space. We might say we are participating in the design of an experimental process that will lead us, I hope, to the completion of the ongoing challenge. So today, we have a rich agenda to cover in 2 hours. So at first, Tom will introduce you to the Discovery for Humans, this community group's goals and organization. Later, we will have two sessions, I mean the item 3 and 4 in the agenda, focusing on exercises respectively about IIIF discovery, which is, for instance, how to find the IIIF content at the site, how to find IIIF manifest for an object with its metadata and permalink. Another exercise is about the Discovery for Humans feature list, focusing on the elements pertaining to scoring rubric for rating IIIF-enabled discovery systems. The first block of exercise will be presented by Richard Higgins, while Ben Bachelar, so sorry for my pronunciation, Ben, will present the second one. Andrew Wilson will present his very useful guide to finding IIIF manifest URLs on popular collections websites, while Arcadia Falcone will focus on the analysis of the Discovery for Humans features at current IIIF sites, highlighting some exemplars. Finally, let me encourage you to speak in the open discussion that Anne will lead in order to share your experiences and ideas on the Discovery for Humans. I would like to ask you to put your questions in the chat as they came, so feel free to put your question as they came to you. And now I think it's time to give the floor to Tom, who will talk about the Discovery for Humans community group. And again, on behalf of the other co-chairs of the group, I would like to thank you for your interest in joining us today. Thanks. So, Tom.
Thanks, Paula. If you want to escape, I'll grab this. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
I believe that is the right screen. Oops, I often hit share instead of present. Great. Well, Paula, I loved your greeting. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is going to be, as Paula said, just a brief overview of some of the activities and really some of the framing discussions that have been going on within the Discovery for Humans group. We formed at the very beginning of this calendar year and promptly spent about the first 3 to 4 months really trying to tease apart what did we mean by discovery, which for anyone who's been involved in libraries, archives, museum, or research work knows that it's a rich term with many possible meanings and many different interpretations about what's important. Kelly Babcock from University of Toronto has put together this wonderful kind of splash screen, which describes the D4H community group. And as Paula has said, with her wonderful haystack metaphor, one of the founding premise of IIIF is to enable interoperability of content, but interoperable content is of no use if you can't find it. And because we're talking about discovery for humans, usability inevitably and very early became a core part of this group's discussions. As we realized, in some cases, people were possibly able to find IIIF content, but it wasn't quite clear how to make use of it or to leverage its interoperability features. So we've reduced, there's a couple page long charter document on the web and linked in Google Docs in a future slide. But one way to reduce the mission and the focus of Discovery for Humans group is, how do you find content in the next silo over? If you're already in a discovery interface, presumably you can find what's there. But the beauty of IIIF is that you can also find and use content that is outside your immediate context. And then once you have found that, how do you use it? As I mentioned, a lot of the discussions revolved around exactly what kind of problems are we trying to solve and for what types of users. So most of our discussions ultimately boiled down to trying to figure out these various vectors. And we've identified 3 key axes that we're concerned with. So scoping number 1 is that for the purposes of discovery for humans, discovery and usability are of co-equal concerns. One idea that's been floated within the working group, which might be a useful shortcut, is perhaps we're focused on the usability of discovery systems. A second scoping question is, are we focused on all digital content and the usability of that, or just IIIF content? That is, do users need to know and understand that something is IIIF enabled before they're looking at it? Or are we really focused on how all digital content works to maximize the discoverability of that, and then look at IIIF as a distinct subset? For people who've been involved in this sector for a while, discovery is a huge topic, and we've really decided deliberately to focus specifically on the discoverability and usability of IIIF content. Now, obviously, many of the interfaces for the institutions participating in IIIF present lots of different types of content. It's not just IIIF, but we're focused on the subset of content that is IIIF enabled, or the subset of discovery interfaces that are dedicated to IIIF. The third thing that becomes interesting is that we're focused on the discovery and usability of IIIF discovery interfaces for all levels of users. You might crudely categorize people into muggles. If you're a Harry Potter fan, you'll know these are people who are unaware of the wizarding world. And there are many, many users, perhaps the majority of our users, who are unaware that IIIF exists. They don't understand what the little IIIF badge means if they see it. And they don't necessarily care to learn more. In some cases they might, but in some cases they won't. We also have users who might be aware of IIIF, but not necessarily of all the features and potential that it brings. And then finally, there's certainly a class of power users, power researchers, power scholars who are aware of IIIF and want to make full use of the capabilities to leverage content between sites or leverage tools across many different suites. One of the things that I think we've discovered in our discussions is that we can't, in terms of humans, there are humans in all of these categories, and we can't focus on just the muggles to the exclusion of the aware or the savvy, nor can we focus just on, say, the savvy and the aware and complicate things for the muggles. So as we're focused on both discovery and usability, we need to consider the level and the motivations of our different classes of users. So this leads to perhaps a slight amendment or enhancement to our mission, which is, how do you find content in the next silo over? How do you use it once you find it? And how do you address both of these questions for all levels of stakeholders and their different motivations? A really good question, but one that we are not focused on in this community group so far, is how can IIIF providers syndicate their content to promote discovery through other sites? And I think this falls squarely, at least the technical means, into what the Discovery TSG is working on and approaching. And we hope that these two things will dovetail over time. I mentioned the first few months of the work of the community group. We really wanted to understand how we would tackle discovery and approach it. And we boiled down the work of the working group into 6 high-level goals with supporting tasks in each. And these are the goals, and again, these are linked down below, and see the complete list of D4H goals. First was to research and understand how people discover IIIF materials. So rather than just supposing what people do, is to actually have some user research and research-backed studies. Second, we wanted to do an analysis of current discovery systems in the IIIF universe to basically take a census of what features and functions are already out there, what are the patterns that we're seeing, what are things that might be successful, what are things that might be best left in the past. Based on these two things, we saw a third step, which was to design and test prototypes of potential discovery enhancements. So what are the patterns and functionalities for discovery in the IIIF universe that really assist humans? Fourth is, based on that, we want to generate recommendations, research-backed recommendations to improve discovery by humans that might be used by all sites and all IIIF providers. And then finally, two twin goals. One is that we want to catalyze the development of discovery solutions within and across the IIIF community. I think it's safe to say that one of our assumptions is there will not be a universal discovery solution for IIIF content, and a rising tide raises all ships. So what we're hoping is, through our work, lots of different sites, lots of different institutions, lots of different tool providers, aggregators, et cetera, would be able to incorporate our findings and recommendations into their own environments to promote cross-discovery. And then finally, communication and dissemination of our findings and our work outputs is one of the core goals. We're not building a central discovery engine. We're not building a central registry. We're not building a central directory. We're really hoping that we can get the community to lift itself up. We focused, those goals are perhaps in a sequential order, with understanding current user research being a logical place to start. Over the course of several months this year, with a few COVID interruptions, we attempted to do a survey of what usability research and user experience research had already been conducted that was relevant to or focused on IIIF. We found that there actually is not that much research that has been published. There is some general user research that's been done on digital content in general, user behavior, user patterns, affordances that work well, but those were not really relevant. They were tangential at best to IIIF concerns. There are also many examples of specific institutional usability research and user experience design. But these really focused on very specific systems, interfaces, and institutional goals, not necessarily on generic patterns of IIIF usability. So while we made some progress on this goal, one of the realizations we eventually came to was that this just isn't out there so far in broad swaths or in a way that we could mine in a rich fashion. Which led to the second realization is that there is a need or an opportunity within IIIF for open-ended user research. And one of the things that we would propose, and we have forecast as an activity for 2021, is that the IIIF community and the D4H community group in particular may embark upon trying to do a distributed set of task-based user studies, persona development, and in particular, some user journey mapping could be particularly helpful for understanding how people navigate across sites and different IIIF resources. With the help of Claire DeMarco and her teammate Anne at the Harvard University Libraries, or Harvard Libraries, we've really identified 3 key user research questions, and we might start by focusing on the first 1 or 2. First is, do image researchers who are familiar with IIIF IIIF behave differently from those who are not familiar? And then what are the ways in which users climb that ladder or that staircase of levels of users from going from a muggle or aware to aware or savvy? Second is, what are the exact features that researchers, what are the IIIF friendly features that researchers use or that they would use? And do they find engaging with IIIF features to be of value in their research? And then finally, specifically in the context of discovery for humans or finding things in the next silo over, what is a user's journey when wanting to work with resources from more than one site, and what features or affordances either facilitate or impede that journey? So this is, I think we've made great progress on clarifying what some of the questions are, and this is future work. The second big goal that we've focused on early in the work is analyzing current discovery systems. And this really has been very productive and will be the basis for some of the exercises for the rest of today. We wanted to do a landscape survey of current IIIF sites. We wanted to do an inventory of discovery features. So for example, what is common, what features and functions are common across many sites, and therefore maybe are good to do, or maybe therefore good to avoid. And what do only a few sites do? In some cases, it may be because they're in a cul-de-sac or not a very productive approach. But in other cases, we've found instances where people have done very innovative things that are isolated to just their site or perhaps a couple of sites and would be worthy of copying or emulating across the IIIF universe. And then third is, can we identify patterns and lessons from this survey in order to inform all of us in terms of how we enhance the presentation of IIIF resources in our own discovery and presentation interfaces? We think that some of what we've done up to now, and which we'll talk about in just a second, is going to be quite helpful. One is, as people are implementing IIIF, there really is no good structured way to survey features and different patterns of implementation that we're aware of. So we think providing examples of how people have implemented features that are common to many people, think of the IIIF badge, could be quite useful. Would also be helpful to have a comprehensive list of the types of discovery features and their different levels of usability or different approaches to usability across the IIIF universe, again, for taking a census for possible emulation or assessment. We think it's helpful to have a topology of these types of features, and Ben is going to talk a bit more about this. There's lots of ways to slice and dice or group sets of features, and they lead to different kind of conclusions and analyses. We're specifically interested in, can we identify not just generic discovery features, but those that support an advanced IIIF discovery. And we think that this might lead to building a checklist for institutions or researchers to do a self-evaluation, or providers to do a self-evaluation of their own tools or resources to see how well they're doing compared to an average of the IIIF universe. This might be used as a guide or to inform development for future discovery platforms or overhauls of existing ones. And finally, it would be excellent, we think, to showcase some of the exemplary feature implementations. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Richard Higgins, and he's going to take us through our first interactive exercise. Richard, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tom. I will now share my screen. And we will see, hopefully, the next slide. Hopefully we are seeing a slide there.
Looks good, Richard.
Good, right. Yes, this is an exercise, and this is billed as a workshop. So we felt that we needed to get the audience to do some work. Not as easy as it normally is, in that I can't walk around the room and look over your shoulders and make sure that you're actually following these exercises through rather than just checking your emails. But there are on this slide 2 URLs suggested, and if you wish to participate, please try following up on one of these with your browsers and having a look at these sites. We have suggested them because they are simple sites. In the case of Parker on the web, it is a very nice site that is focused on one resource, medieval manuscripts. So it has been possible to introduce quite a lot of homogeneous features across, and the metadata is nice and simple. The Harvard Curiosity site, which is a new site that has been created at Harvard in the last few months, has a much broader range of materials, and there are different things to notice when you look at that site. What I'm going to do, for those of you who are not rushing off and browsing these sites, is I will, once I finish my introduction, look at a couple of the sites and draw attention to some of the features that we have noticed. Very basic suggestions really to think about whilst looking at these sites. Really, how do you do the searching? Are there ways of finding your way in? Normally these take the form of our old favorite, the Google blank search box, into which you type with hope and hope that something comes back. Normally once you're into a system, there will be some sort of faceting. Now faceting, I think we have found, is much more effective on a focused site such as Parker, because it is very easy to focus your facets on medieval manuscripts. The more different and various types of content appear in one site, the more difficult things like faceting becomes. When you move across different types of material, you get into problems of how you normalize date searching, for example. These are all things to think about when you're looking at more disparate content. And very basic questions to put to yourself as you're going through. Can you find the IIIF content on the site? Now, in both of these simple cases, what we have pointed you to is entirely IIIF content. So the answer to that one is, in this case, yes. But there are certainly two different types of search sites out there in the wild. We have some IIIF content amongst our discovery system, and you will be quite lucky if you find it. Or this is our IIIF content, please look in it, but we won't tell you if you've missed material which is amongst our most important collections, but we haven't actually yet got round to putting into IIIF. So again, questions that arise. More specifically within this, once you've found IIIF content, can you find the IIIF manifest that relates to it? Is this a question that is of great interest to us in the IIIF community, but actually of no interest whatsoever to people who are merely looking for the images of what they're interested in? Or does the fact that they find more and more IIIF metadata floating around what they have found inspire them to think, aha, I can zoom in, I can zoom out on this image, or I wonder if there are annotations. Shall I have a look and see if there are any annotations? The question, I have found a beautiful image, but how on earth do I find out more about it? Is there text surrounding it in the discovery system? Do I have to click on an icon that may or may not look like a little eye for information? Do I have to jump out into a completely different cataloging system from which I may not actually be able to ever get back to where I found that image that I was so interested in the first place? Final consideration, having found what it is that you are interested in, can you actually pass the thing on to anybody else? And when you come again tomorrow to look for it again, can you find it again? Is there a simple permalinking system that enables you easily to store somewhere a URL that will enable you to find the thing that you have found again? Now, these are all questions that we have to ask. I think something that we learned very early on in the process was that we make an awful lot of assumptions, both about what we interpret certain features of IIIF meaning, and also what we expect of other people. It's useful in these situations to, at least for those of us of a certain vintage, to think back to the early 1990s and when we first encountered the World Wide Web, and how it took a while to realize that something underlined meant that you clicked on it to link to somewhere else. This in turn meant that you had to no longer present your text with underlining that meant other things. There's certainly a convention in book cataloging that underlining was one way of conveying the title of a book. And it took quite a while for people to realize that you didn't convey the title of a book by underlining it, because most people then assumed that it was a link and they would click on it and get very annoyed. So, some thoughts. To now look at Parker on the web, there are some obvious routes in provided for us, and there is very helpfully a search box. So we can search for something, and I always look for fish. And we have got some results, and immediately we are seeing things that look very IIIF-y to us. Now, what does this mean? I wonder what happens if I click on it. Is it going to take me to the manifest of an object, which it looks from the URL being displayed in the bottom bar as it might? So if I click on it, it actually takes me to a page that tells me about IIIF, which isn't perhaps what I was expecting. But then I see the IIIF logo down there again, but it doesn't actually do anything at all. The great thing for you as discoverers is that there are no mistakes that you can make. There are no wrong answers. All mistakes and all wrong answers are the fault of the people who designed the system, not the fault of you. If they make assumptions that a logo like this means a particular thing, does it mean a particular thing in a particular context? We spent quite a while actually trying to find a definitive explanation anywhere of what this IIIF logo was actually meant to mean. And while various of us could remember occasions on which it had been discussed, there is no Dummy's Guide to IIIF, where in chapter 1 you discover, well, this is what a IIIF logo means. So is it something that we actually need to make explicit? If we all build it into the discovery systems that we build, is it just going to be assimilated by osmosis by people using it, or do we actually need more guidance on how to use these systems? Going into an item, we can see perhaps here down by looking down here why the search result for fish came up, and indeed we can see some fish and an annotation for fish. So these are all things that we're really just finding from IIIF, but here we have an embedded viewer and probably really quite a strong assumption that the users of this system understand how a Mirador viewer works. Do we need something here that is a little link at the size that says more explanation about how this viewer works? These are often counterintuitive when you are designing a discovery system, because there is an obvious premium on screen space. You don't want too many things popping up and too busy a screen. But do we need more help for people here? So those really are just a few of the questions that I hope people will be asking themselves. And I think that we intend to produce greater lists of the discovery systems that are out there. And we have been reviewing these, and I think as we go along, understanding more and more that there are assumptions that are maybe not shared amongst all of us about how the different systems work. And what we really need are more and more people with more and more levels of experience within the IIIF world. Indeed, many people who are unaware that they are using IIIF in the first place to be using these systems and to be able to feed back to the designers of the systems exactly what it is that completely confuses them. Unfortunately, with systems like this, you never know what you've missed because you've missed it. And I think at that point, I will hand back.
Hi everyone, I think it's over to me now. My name is Andrew Wilson, I'm from the University of St Andrews. You've probably all been in a situation that I was in this summer where you're desperate to try and find IIIF content for use in demonstrating or whatever, and you spend hours like trolling through different websites, even just Googling IIIF monkey for a picture of a monkey or things like that. So we had a particular use case this summer for our teaching and learning at the university. So we created a bit of software called Exhibit with Nemo Scene. We've done a few demos of that before. And this was specifically for our teaching staff and our students to be able to create content with IIIF, but not just our content, but content around the web. One of the main problems that we had with this was trying to explain to our staff how they could actually reuse IIIF content from other places on the internet. So we basically created a document. I trolled through 30 or 40 different IIIF websites and quickly created a PDF document, which I can share my screen hopefully. Hopefully here, share. There we go. Basically a PDF document of how to find the IIIF manifest, which is what we needed specifically for Exhibit. You needed to copy and paste the IIIF manifest URL into it. How to find the IIIF manifest links across various sites, some of the larger IIIF sites. And it consisted of a link to the collection and also then screenshots on how to actually find the IIIF manifest link. This served two purposes for us. The first one was to highlight actually, here's the direct links to where you would start to search the sites, because as I said before, sometimes it's actually really difficult trying to find where IIIF-enabled sites are. I know IIIF Consortium have a list of consortium members, but a lot of the URLs for those go directly just to the university homepages and that kind of thing. So it was to directly go to where the IIIF content was. And then obviously the second purpose was to actually try and grab hold of that IIIF manifest link. So in that quick sweep, there were some observations, but I mean, I think most of them have been covered more generally with the D4H group and will be covered in more depth. Obviously, the big thing was there was quite a lot of IIIF logos everywhere. And for us, in trying to educate our academic staff, it's like to the people on the lowest rung of the muggles, no one knows what IIIF is. So if you've just got a IIIF logo on next to a picture, no one's ever might click on that. The other thing was some sites have gone the completely other way. They've completely obfuscated IIIF. So they use terms such as compare, and then you could add things to Mirador. Some use things like open in Mirador, again, or even logos of Mirador or the Universal Viewer logo. Again, I guess to those that didn't mean much to people who have never used that system before, the lowest rung of that ladder. Some sites just did not have their IIIF manifest available, even when I went into like view the source and had a look there. I don't know if that's a conscious decision because they didn't want the reuse of assets or not. Another problem was a lot of sites just use the image API for delivery of images and didn't actually have the presentation API for manifests. Often there was quite a lot of different, when you clicked on a IIIF button or you clicked on a IIIF link or a manifest URL, it was different. Something different happened every time. So it may link directly to the manifest JSON. Great. It might put you into Mirador, and then in which case there's a few extra steps that you would have to maybe. I don't know if I've got an example here. Click on the information icon, and then click on the copy to actually get hold of to copy the URL. So there was all different sort of ways of which the IIIF manifest URL sort of embedded itself. So The other problem we found as well was that, and this has already been covered again earlier, is that there was such a huge mix of IIIF content mixed in with the non-IIIF content. So some sites just, there was no way to actually filter that content down at all. And one of the things that we were thinking of when we were going through all of this, and I think it was covered yesterday actually in the badges presentation, where there was that wonderful plugin detective where you could just maybe have a button and it would find the manifest on a page. Almost when we were discussing this a few months ago, I think it was Mike Bennett at Edinburgh suggested something like a meta tag embedded into the page of a record, which then at least something programmatically could, like a plugin, could actually get access to the thing. So they were just some observations when we were creating this document, and we shared this with the IIIF community, and people found it really useful. So what we've been working on recently is a guide. So this PDF was very static, and it was going to be an absolute pain to update. So Glenn has worked his magic very, very quickly in order for us to have this website available. And basically, it's at guides.iiif.io, and you basically have a list of many IIIF websites. When you go into them, it will give you a link to the search page for that site. And then there'll be some instructions, whether with images or just text instructions, on exactly how to get access to that all-important manifest URL. So in this case, you would have to click the mirror door button, then you'd have to click the I, and then you could copy the URL there. So this has literally just gone live like 5 hours ago. We quickly transferred over everything that was in this PDF document. So the PDF document is now defunct, thankfully. But what we do welcome are contributions to this. These were just the ones that I quickly scanned across the internet a few months ago. It's missing a whole heap of them. There's two ways that you can contribute to this. The first way is there is on the homepage for the guides, there is a Google form, and all you need to do is fill in that Google form, which contains your contact details, so we can get back to you if things change. Which I will just type in. Close enough. And then it will ask you for your institution, a link to the actual homepage where you would start to search the site, and then a description of how you would get access to the IIIF manifest. That'll get submitted to IIIF staff. We can then go back over that, and we can create screenshots and add them to the all-important guides website. Alternatively, if you're feeling brave, you can do a pull request in the repo and add that yourself. And there is Glenn's created a very nice contributed guide there with exactly how to do that as well. This is just a first pass. This is literally just how to get access to IIIF manifests. It might be a start of something bigger, depending on where things go with adding more metadata, more information about these sites. But that was where we're heading. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to drop them into chat. And with that, I will hand you back. Hello, did everyone hear that, by the way? Or did I just talk completely? Oh no, did I just mute myself for 10 minutes or did everyone?
No.
All right. Phew, I was absolutely paranoid there because it said I was muted and I couldn't remember to mute myself. Excellent. Okay, perfect. I will hand everyone back over. Thank you.
I think I'm up next. I'm Arcadia Falcone. I am the metadata coordinator for digital collections at Stanford, and I'm going to be talking about more of the discovery feature analysis. So one collaborative effort of D4H over the last several months was compiling a slide deck documenting the features available on different sites for discovering IIIF compliant content. For each site included in this deck, annotated screenshots highlight particular affordances and absences related to IIIF discovery. So far, we've analyzed 16 sites, and they include both single institution discovery platforms and as well as aggregators combining content from multiple sources in a shared discovery environment. And this work is ongoing. We're continuing to add new sites to the slide deck and also welcome further contributions. So next I'm going to talk about some example implementations of features from the feature checklist that came out of this work that Ben's going to talk about a little later. First, let's look at how SearchWorks, the Stanford Library's discovery platform, allows users to limit their searching and browsing to only IIIF compliant materials. The SearchWorks homepage explicitly links to a facet for IIIF resources. And from there, the user can enter search terms and use the facets to browse within the set of available IIIF compliant materials. The user experience is the same as for the broader catalog, but focused specifically on IIIF. Next, let's look at how Biblissima, an aggregator of resources from multiple institutions, presents IIIF compliant content and provides direct access to IIIF manifests. Within a set of search results, a IIIF icon clearly identifies which resources are IIIF compliant. Mousing over the icon changes the cursor to signal that the icon is drag and drop, and reveals a helpful tooltip, providing context for IIIF and explaining what the user can do with the icon and how. The tooltip also links to more information about IIIF, as well as explicitly to the item's manifest. This additional information provides a new user with background knowledge to help them understand and begin to make use of IIIF. On the item page, the manifest URL is displayed explicitly with a helpful copy button as part of the display. The manifest URL is also included in the metadata displayed in the image viewer, making the manifest easily accessible for both immediate viewing in the browser and for use via URL in other applications. Another feature we looked at was the available of APIs. Harvard Art Museum offers not only an API for programmatic access to their content, they also provide comprehensive and new user-friendly documentation for how and why they might make use of the API. The IIIF specific API documentation explains the difference between the image and presentation APIs and includes examples and use cases to illustrate API use, all in non-tech jargony languages. And particularly of note, in the API documentation, they include a section that is specifically a beginner's guide to working with APIs that includes complete code snippets in various languages, showing the API's applications in a fuller context that is very useful to novice users, rather than just presenting a URL. Continuing with the theme of new users, Harvard Library's digital collections portal also provides some affordances that are helpful to users new to IIIF. Every IIIF compliant item displays an explicit "What is IIIF" link next to the links for the IIIF manifest and the Mirador viewer. This takes the user to the FAQ at IIIF.io, both providing basic context to the new user and connecting them with the gateway for accessing further resources related to IIIF. And finally, let's look at Sacha, a project of the Austrian National Library, which provides demos and documentation for orienting a user to using IIIF via their site. In addition to pre-populating their item and collection manifest lookups with sample IDs, Sacha also provides a set of both item and collection demo objects for which the user can view the manifest and the item in a variety of viewers. Sacha also offers extensive documentation, including a section devoted to the site's use of IIIF. So these examples highlight just some of the discovery feature implementations that we identified from work on the slide deck. And next, I'm going to turn this over to Ben Bacalar, who is going to discuss the feature list extracted from the slide deck in more detail.
Okay, hello everyone. Oh, I hope this works. I have to go into my system preferences. I'm on a brand new laptop, sorry. I have to give myself permission to share my screen. First time I'm using Zoom on this new laptop. Okay, so try again. Security, privacy. Why is it not showing up? I'll give it one more second to see if I can figure it out. Advanced? No. All right, I think I'm going to need somebody else to load the slides and I'll talk through them.
I can do that then.
Sorry about that. This has been a handicap for me all week long. Okay, so picking up where everyone else brought us to, as the features were gathered in the slide deck, so I guess it was about 16 different sites, but maybe 100 plus slides were contributed to that deck. They were summarized into a set of unique features, which was maybe about 60 or so. And once we extracted the IIIF specific features, that maybe took out about 20 of them, leaving 40 or so. And then the work begins, as kind of Tom referenced. How do we create a typology? How do we create some kind of grouping or categorization that makes sense? And as we played around with different ways of grouping them, as Tom mentioned, you end up drawing different conclusions based on how you group them. So this is just to say that the work is not straightforward and it is not done yet. And in fact, today, we kind of boiled it down to just about 9 basic features that felt pretty baseline as far as features that facilitate human users finding and using IIIF-enabled content. Next slide. Okay, so in discussions in the group, we came up with this category of visibility and clickability, talking about the user interface. And at a very basic level, we assume, right, that we want the user to be able to access the manifest. And as Andrew pointed out, in some websites that has been made invisible, obfuscated, hidden, perhaps for, licensing reasons, or just perhaps because it just wasn't considered that users might need the manifest. But for sure, we can say that if users can access the manifest, that is a good thing from the IIIF perspective. And in addition, the icon, so not every website uses the IIIF icon. Sometimes it's just, for instance, a hyperlink to a manifest, but the icon is becoming a standard, right? Even though it's used in different ways. And so it's even probably too much to say the user can click on an icon, because we just saw some examples where you might hover over it, or it might be a header to then point you to hyperlinks that are related to IIIF. But nonetheless, that is a general feature. When we're searching and browsing on a site that has mixed content, it would be good for the user to discover IIIF content if they could limit their search to just that, or if they could facet their browsing to just that. For those sites that are able to implement an API or have interest in doing so, that's a great way, right, to encourage reuse and discoverability of content. And if you do produce an API, of course, putting together some public documentation makes it more usable and enhances the ability of people to discover more IIIF content. And in our help section, there's several examples of sites that have an About IIIF page within their discovery system or the larger kind of landing page. And inside there, it seems like it's a great idea to display a demo IIIF item, especially for the muggles and the people who are new to IIIF. as well as a collection if that's relevant for the site. How does that appear as a IIIF-enabled collection? So that is 9 baseline features in total. And if you go to the next, is there a slide after this? No, okay, go back. Thank you. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna walk through an exercise of assessing the digital Bodleian site together, not as a judgment. They didn't volunteer this site, but it's a great site and useful to think about these things. And afterwards, after we do the group exercise, if you would choose a site that you aren't necessarily familiar with, perhaps from the list that Glenn and Andrew have provided, and test out completing this form, this data collection form, that would be really helpful for us to test out not only the usability of the form itself, but also how we can collate all this data together and what kind of information we can extract from it. So unfortunately, because of my technical difficulties, I'm not going to be able to do the walkthrough assessment of the digital Bodleian as an example. Arcadia, would you be able to load both the form and the digital Bodleian site?
I can try, give me one moment.
I don't know if anyone else has experienced the newest Mac OS updates, but there's so much security built into it. It asks permission for everything, and it's really annoying. Yeah, I would say avoid the upgrade. Okay, so I suppose if you don't mind, Arcadia, following along, let's go to the form and let's look at the first question. And the question is, what kind of content does this site include? Is it IIIF compliant content only or a mix? And so as somebody on the inside of the institution, if you're using this as a self-assessment tool, obviously you would know the answer. For those of us, you today doing this with the site you're unfamiliar with, you may not be able to assess that. If we look at the digital Bodleian site, just on the homepage, there actually is no way immediately to tell that it contains IIIF compliant content. I think if you could go to the digital Bodleian site, you might find it under About. In the FAQs, there's a reference to, there's a one line actually scrolling down a bit. Yeah, so it's relatively buried. I had somebody else test this out yesterday. So that's kind of an interesting thing to think about, right? Oh, there it is, right by your cursor. All digital Bodleian objects have a corresponding IIIF manifest. So that's just one data point, right, to think about. Can users understand that there is IIIF content here? Or is it an implicit assumption of the site designers? And is that useful to surface to users? If we go back to the form, going down, so if there was a mix, the questions would be, can the user limit their search and can they facet their browsing? So if we just briefly go over to the digital Bodleian site and take a look at the search, the advanced search, we'll just jump straight there. Right, there's nothing that jumps out here that says, can we limit? And that's of course because this site is already fully compliant. And looking at the faceting on the left bar, which appears in the advanced search, it's not there either. And that's perfectly okay because this site is 100% IIIF. But for other sites, it's more important. Back to the form. Okay, going down. All right, so can the user immediately determine whether an item is IIIF compliant or not? So if we click into an item, I did a dry run with this with a grad student assistant yesterday who is somewhere between a muggle and an aware, and they had trouble finding the IIIF logo, which is up there in the top left of the viewer. And as Andrew has documented, it's in different places and many different sites. But let's say we were aware and we saw, immediately I can see IIIF is here. It's actually not in the metadata, I think it used to be on the previous version of Digital Bodleian. So that would be an answer for yes for that question. Let's go back to the form. A IIIF icon or badge is displayed to the user and links to a viewer, the manifest. In this case, it's actually both. So we might want to update our form to accommodate these newer design patterns that are surfacing multiple options about what you can do with the IIIF badge. But we could answer that it can be displayed in a IIIF compatible viewer, for instance. Scrolling down, the function of the badge is clearly conveyed. So this is an interesting one. Here we can certainly say true because when you click on it, it presents you with options. In most cases, it just does an action, which is either launch the viewer or launch the manifest. And if you're aware enough, you can look at the preview URL and see if it's a JSON file. But thinking about it from the user's perspective, and especially people who are new to it, which let's say is the majority of the world, would it be useful to convey the function of the IIIF icon through the pop-ups that we saw in some of those examples today? I think so. So back to the form. The user can immediately locate the URL. So this is just kind of another way of asking the same question. Can they get to the manifest? Because so far, that has been the best way, right, for users to work with these digital objects. We don't have content state yet. So if you have access to that URL, you can save it, you can email it. And in many cases in discovery systems, we see the URL is part of the the item metadata, such as digivatlet. And so you would just answer true or false for whatever example you choose, whatever site you're assessing. Going down, the user can view the IIIF manifest for an item in their web browser. Again, can they access the manifest? And that's been kind of one of our focuses so far. Next question, can they download it? So this is an interesting one because actually, if you can open it, you can download it. I'm not sure if we've identified any examples where there's a download button that says download manifest, because I think in most cases, the browser is going to automatically open it. And would that be a useful pattern for people to download manifests? I think probably lots of system architects are shaking their heads no. We don't want people downloading those manifests. Scrolling down, the user can access manifests programmatically via an API. So of course, this will not be true for most websites. And in fact, even with the Harvard Art Museum example, I was going to bring up that page. I'm not sure exactly where, unless you're already aware the API exists, I'm not sure if they link to it within the Harvard Art Museum's website. Is it up on the top menu or something like that? So this does seem like a tool that would primarily be useful for implementers and people on the inside of an institution. Again, if the API is there, is it publicly documented? And is there another final question? Oh, the help, right. So is there some help provided to the user? In the case of the one example we just saw where there's a pop-up hover, maybe that takes the place of an about page. Maybe it doesn't have to be a whole page, but just some kind of contextual window. But in this case, we're asking, does it have a page? And then on that page, can the user find a demo IIIF item and a demo IIIF collection, if that's relevant for the site? So for instance, on my project, Metascripta, the entire thing is one collection. So there would never be a demonstration of the entire collection. That is the whole site. So having walked you through the questions, I hope that will let you answer them all independently. And if you would go ahead and choose a site and use the, if we go back to the slides, there's a link, and I think Tom posted it in the chat as well, to the Google form. Right, so you could use Glenn's list to pick a site, and then you could use our tiny URL to access the Google form, and maybe spend the next 5 or 7 minutes running through. And I will monitor the chat in case anyone has any questions that come up while they're doing the exercise. I see 41 participants in the room, so subtracting the presenters, it would be pretty awesome if we got 20 or 30 test assessments to kind of play around with and look at. We're also accepting feedback on the wording and the phrasing and options, so feel free to send us comments on the form itself as well. But again, this is all a work in progress. Yes, Joe, that is something that we struggled with. And so this is one iteration. There is a Google Sheet version with a more detailed analysis, especially for people who are savvy or developers and implementers. We just haven't finalized on the exact dimensions and facets and features that would be part of that assessment. So we didn't feel prepared to demo it today. But you could imagine these features going into a bunch of different formats: implementation guides, scoring rubrics, design references, even a badge, somehow flowing into the badge initiative. I thought I had put a slide in there about that, but I think I might have been working off of a different copy of the slide deck. But yeah, just to comment, you know, this is 9 features and we have about 40 in total. So I think we hope to continue working on pulling that together and then distributing to the community in the coming weeks and months. And so just to point out, Tom and Anne, I think are we at 19 minutes left for the presentation? Do we have until 2 p.m. Eastern?
2:30, I think.
Oh,
So
2:30. All right, good, good.
Yeah,
I
2:30.
think we're okay on time.
Good. So I'm going to suggest about 4 more minutes on this exercise, unless I see lots of comments that people need more time than that. I can check on the form submissions actually. Seeing some responses come in. That's awesome. Yeah, so I see about 10 responses in. I think 1 more minute and then I'll pass it on to the next portion. Really the final portion, which is the discussion. I think just one final comment, Joe, to your question, your most recent one there. I'm not sure, although my mind has strayed there as well, I'm not sure if we're producing a standard or a spec versus just recommendations or guidelines. And I know the conversation within the group has revolved a lot around that. What is the level of what these features are? Okay, I see 12 responses. Thanks everyone, and please continue either as you have time or right now. And I'm going to mute myself.
All right, I think that brings us into the discussion aspect of our session here today. I've been keeping an eye on the chat, and it seems like Joe Padfield has been excellent in asking a lot of questions kind of throughout the presentation, starting from Tom Crane all the way through. So I think probably the best way to kickstart this discussion would actually be to turn it over to Joe so he can present some of his questions and get some responses from both the community that's here today, all 42 of us, as well as some of the panelists that we've had for the moment. So, Joe, if you don't mind, can I turn this over to you for a bit of live questioning?
I'll have to actually remember which questions I asked now. Let's see.
One of your first ones was about thinking about levels of users, so going from model to advanced.
Yeah, it's quite a lot of the systems. I work in the National Gallery in London. We're involved in a lot of research on documentation in general, not just with IIIF. And it's coming across that a lot of research pushes the excellent, pushes the everything done, ticking all of the boxes. And in reality, people can't do that. And in reality, if people think they have to do that, then they tend to not bother because it's too far away from where they can go. So the thought is that if you could essentially say that if you've got a small amount of money and a small amount of time, you could aim for this, and that would be a good thing to do. And that could then lead to what comes next. And if they are then sort of presented with stepping stones, if you do this bit first, and then you can move on to this, and then when you get the next grant, you can move on to the next bit and the next bit. I think that could be quite helpful, particularly when it comes to the features that are being explored at the end. Is that my thought was which features should you do first if you can only do one of them out of the 9? Which ones come next? And that may be based on which ones people have done, but it may actually be based on the community saying, actually, this one's the most important. That one doesn't matter as much. It's great, but actually you'll hit more users if you do these ones first. That was kind of the thought.
Ben, seeing as you were leading our discussion on the featured list, what's your take on this? Where should someone perhaps start when it comes to features?
That was for me, right?
It was. You did features.
I definitely am thinking along the same lines as you, Joe, and I see it visually as one of, the same thing as one of Leander's slides from yesterday, with the kind of increasing levels. I mean, I'm an implementer for a site that's a single collection. And so this list is extremely valuable for me, right? To inform me about what's possible. But I think the conversation in the group has been about, there's so many different contexts in which IIIF is implemented in the GLAM industry and beyond. So is there really a single pathway? Or, what is the best way to present this? Is it in this kind of stepped tiers, or is that too limiting or too constraining? I think are the thoughts. Those are my thoughts on that approach.
I wouldn't disagree with that. The kind of reasons for looking at it is it becomes easier to argue for money. Because if you can say that I want to hit level 1, I want to hit level 2, that's a defined, agreed target that you could put to money people to say that this is what we're wanting to do, this is what we could achieve. If you're looking for a more sort of evolutionary based development, then it is limiting. It would be restrictive. I entirely agree with that. But it's trying to think of the problem based on someone who doesn't understand the solution as well, rather than saying you have to go off and learn the solution and then you'll understand what you want to do first anyway.
For instance, there was one of the features is like, search by image similarity, which is super AI, ML informed and very advanced. So there's a big price tag on implementing something like that. And I know for sure I've worked with scholars who would just pick it off a list and say, all right, that's part of my requirements now. So putting it in some tier of technical sophistication could also be useful. But as I love Tom's phrase, there's many ways to slice and dice this. And so it's really challenging how to present it, how to present all of this work in a single format.
I could ask the second question, and I think then I should probably just let someone else ask some questions. Have you seen any features related to dynamic manifest generation? So I've run a search, give me a manifest that includes all of the search results in it, type thing. So the manifests often seem to be very static, based on a single object or potentially a defined curated collection, rather than what you want to find or what you want to look for. So have you seen anything looking at those sorts of ideas?
I think Arcadia might be able to answer that question, since she extracted that feature from the submitted examples, but I'm not sure.
I know I've seen that on one site at least, but I can't remember which one. I'd have to look through the discovery slide deck to refresh my memory on that.
I'm fairly certain.
Josh says cultural Japan, that may be the one I was thinking of.
So I think it leads more to actually presenting users with what they're looking for, rather than them having to take the provided manifests and cobble them together. So if Cultural Japan's doing that, it'd be a very nice one to explore. And yes, it might be better to wrap it in a collection rather than another manifest. Yeah.
I know you can do this, and Regis, you can probably speak a bit more to this by adding things in Biblissima to a shopping cart, and then it gives you a collection level manifest that you can take wherever you like. But it does include kind of users adding things to a cart.
Well, to give you a use case example, we did an experiment at the National Gallery where you have a persistent identifier for almost everything we're playing with. And if you then ask for a manifest based on that persistent identifier, you can get a manifest for a room, for an artist, for a date, for a title, I mean, we've got 34 portraits of a man in the National Gallery collection. So it's kind of, the idea was removing the expectation of saying what someone will want to look for, and just saying that if we've got a thing, here's the manifest for it. Have fun. And if you search for that, you can find it, and it's just there. So then if the art handling department come in and move the paintings around, then the manifest for that room changes every day, based on what's in it at the same day. I mean, that was used for an app for people wandering around finding locations and finding things within the National Gallery. It's very, very beta, but it was what we were exploring, how useful that would be. So that's kind of why I was curious.
Yeah, I can say that we've also been thinking about that same problem quite a bit.
The Sasha system from the National Library of Austria actually supports this quite well. They've built a whole interface around it, and I've pasted the link in. I know I've seen other sites where there's been a dynamic collection is built from a query, but it's been a hidden feature. I think one of the main areas that would really support IIIF discovery would be more development about what should collections and collections-based search support, and what does that look like? Because it's not been, I don't think it's been well documented or exemplified except in a few systems. And I think it, Joe, as you're indicating, it really supports lots of different, both discoverability use cases, but also reuse cases.
And to answer that question with another question, does that facility belong in the discovery system or in the browser? Is it actually much more useful to have a browser where you can move around and gather up your objects of interest rather than being confined to a single repository?
Are you thinking along the lines of having a Chrome extension that just gathered your manifests together and aggregated them for you as you were going along?
I think if you did it within a discovery system, you would very quickly get annoyed by being stuck in a lot of different discovery systems. It may be more user-friendly to build it into the viewer.
Richard, I like it. Yes, Zotero for IIIF. Just a button to click at the top of your browser. Do we have any other questions at this point?
I can make an observation, which is that in this explaining what IIIF is for an audience, having a centralized place where we can send people for that information that is outside of our ecosystem would be really, really helpful. That is, there's some of that on the IIIF site now, but that is a huge benefit as we try to talk people through this complexity, not about necessarily how you use it in our world, but what this is for a consuming audience.
Yeah, I think we've come across a bit of that in my kind of previous role at Cambridge, is that IIIF for tech people makes sense, IIIF for researchers. There's a sort of literacy boundary there, that lots of the documentation is written for people who are already sort of digitally literate. Which I guess kind of pulls back into our earlier point about sort of muggles versus, moving towards savvy. I don't know, does anyone have any ideas about how we can start to make that jump? How we can do a bit more perhaps outreach or facilitate things in terms of discovery that might help move people up that ladder, so to speak?
Well, I mean, just thinking about the feature list itself, right? The fact that it includes these features, having an about page, having a demo, and the idea that we're going to develop this feature list and attach examples to it would at least take one step forward in the direction of, if somebody's implementing, they can find a good example of how do we explain this, right? Like using the Harvard's about IIIF or something as an example. It doesn't centrally solve the problem of IIIF itself producing that. And I can imagine there's lots of challenges to IIIF taking a particular, stance on what it is. It seems to me such an open and evolving standard. So that translation, where does that translation fall to? Whose responsibility is it? At least with the feature list plus examples, once it's complete, there will be some reference points. But that's maybe only one small step forward.
Yeah, I think Stephanie's question here, or Stefano, sorry, tiny screen, question in the chat of, does every user need to move, quote, up the ladder, or shall IIIF rather offer advantages to all levels? I think is a good question. Tom, as you introduced the idea of a ladder, do you want to talk or kick us off about that one?
Sure. I think there's going to be many patrons or many users, perhaps the majority or vast majority, who are going to be muggles and may not care. So their motivation isn't to learn more about IIIF. That's probably people who show up in working groups like this, rather than the 99% who just want to get some sort of task done. One of the areas I think we have seen, I guess one question is, how do you make it possible to get the task done while not hiding information that people might find useful? And from personal experience at Stanford, one of our theories was people shouldn't have to learn what a manifest is to be able to benefit from IIIF. And there was a period where we deliberately hid the manifests and didn't make it possible to find them, which then made it impossible to do other things like build collections in Mirador. So how do you, I guess the question is, how can you support both? Which is, I think, paraphrasing what David just said.
I might just add into this too, like I'm not to super criticize it, I'm not sure ladder is the right metaphor, because it's maybe not teleology or end-based. Like, I think Stefano's question is a good one, and I'm thinking back to my time at my previous library. For us, it was more about revealing interesting and useful functionality to the people to whom it would be useful, not necessarily trying to shepherd everyone along a path, but making it clear, finding the right line where Like there are tools that would let people do the things they wanted to do on their own without having to, work with staff or do something like that.
So I guess the question from there is, how do we make those tools available to those who want to use them, while not overwhelming users who don't need to see or don't want to see everything possible?
The other question that comes to mind in this context is for whom the IIIF.io website is for. Right now it's for me and for the people in this room, and that's great. But I don't know that I'm the core audience for IIIF anymore. I was 5 years ago. The APIs and the specs are super, super essential for implementers, but I feel like the universe of IIIF users is now bigger than the universe of IIIF implementers. And do we need to, is it useful to think about shifting that context?
I'll jump in on that real quickly just to say, and I know there's not time to get into everything we're doing in terms of website revision. This is like super front of mind. Like it's been super clear for a long time that the universe of IIIF interested people is way bigger than developers and implementers. So we do have a lot of work done. We're basically working on a template now. But I also, I guess I want to be careful. Like I think IIIF.io has a super important role to play here, but I'm not sure it will solve all these problems for everyone. Like I think we can provide a centralized place to point to, but that may not be the solution for many institutions or all institutions. So we definitely are going to help, but I think there's also an important line to think through of like, what's the immediate triage of understanding at the like search result level or the collection display level, and then how do we fit into that ecosystem? And for sure we're going to have a friendlier website with bigger fonts and better accessibility.
One thought that comes to mind to me about who that audience is, I mean, there's many audiences everywhere all the time, right? But taking a step beyond the developer and technical audience, it seems to me like if you're the kind of user that just wants the object and IIIF works invisibly and you've got it, great, no problem. The implementers have handled that. But for digital humanists and scholars, it would be nice if there was just one word to contain all the variations of those, but that's the new primary audience. It's the people who are doing research or getting degrees or doing cultural heritage work. And so just to my mind, putting a label on it, that would be the one I would choose as the new expanded audience. I don't know what people think of that.
Ben, I totally agree with you about the audience. I mean that scholars and researchers are so much interested in finding manifests, in finding URLs. If I can relate to my experience in the Vatican Library, I can assure you that lots of scholars, also aged ones, ask for a tool for discover other materials able to, because they want to compare. They are dreaming about a kind of tools for discover witnesses or variants, witnesses of the same works of variants in order to work on critical edition in a new style. So we had many experiences this year. In spite of the pandemic, we had lots of online workshop in Italy, because the interest in the IIIF is rising, and lots of people is asking exactly for that. And the audience is, again, researchers and scholars. So I think that in particular, I don't want to focus only on manuscript collection. So because this is our domain, but in particular, I think that digital libraries focusing on rare materials are a good place for experimenting exactly this. And so we can consider Biblissima, for example, as a good example for finding manifests exactly for this purpose.
Mm-hmm. I guess that's one of our questions as well, as how do we take the example that Biblissima has provided about ways in which we can find at least manuscripts that are IIIF-enabled that are, as Paolo was saying, different witnesses to a given text. Is there a role for us as a discoverability community to think about how that could perhaps be expanded or used as a way of thinking about finding things that are even beyond sort of Biblissima's scope, be they paintings for the National Gallery or, I don't know, scientific images? Yeah, and Ronald's comment, gosh, I do need to get a bigger screen here. Perhaps we were trying to get a Google-like outcome before the steps which created it, especially Yahoo and human edited directory, which helped to get so many people started. Ronald, do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Thanks, Anne, and nice to see you and everyone. The Stanford people can be proud in giving us a number of things, including a spin-out that created Yahoo. And maybe a few remember it's an acronym. Yet another hierarchically oriented outline was how Yahoo started. It gave rise to search engines once they had built up a curated collection with human editors everywhere. Good library science. I think in a way we're trying to skip ahead and get everything machine readable before trying to build up as we're doing piecemeal, and great examples of what Glenn had put together we saw earlier from Andrew. But so just a question mark, do we need to have those guides expanded to get people going and then to feed the mill that will eventually become the searchable repository?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. In some ways, everyone's building their own browser, right? I see a lot of correlation between the HTML and browser versus IIIF and viewers. But here the community has chosen to distribute, decentralize the approach. That wasn't my main comment though. The one thing, I think the current biggest value for the feature list is for implementers to remember that there's things that they probably forgot about. There's human related things that the developers forgot to build in that would be pretty much low cost and easy to incorporate. Again, overlapping a ton with Leander's presentation yesterday. That's like a concrete value immediately. As far as a standard or something approaching a standard, I think you're right that things are in progress. Things are still shifting quite a bit.
So just jumping in, I mean, we benefit from all that browser work and all the search engine work. But before there was a Google, there was an Alta Vista, and they both got started more or less with Yahoo. So Yahoo got so big it needed a search engine, and Google, which started in the same startup place, started with Yahoo. and then later outstrip them to some extent. There used to be the ability to go behind the search engine and get to still a directory. And I suspect it's still hiding back there somewhere.
Yeah, looking in the chat, it seems Joe's chimed in the general can't see the wood for the trees issue, which I think is a nice way of summing this up. Joe, do you want to expand on that a little bit?
It's very easy when you're building something that you know very well to forget the things or over assume that people will understand what you're doing. And it's kind of, it comes often to when you're documenting systems or documenting complex systems, you assume people will know certain things, or of course they'll understand that. I think it comes right back to that sort of IIIF muggle idea. You kind of assume if someone's playing with it, they know what IIIF stands for, but lots of people don't, and have to keep on explaining that. It's one of the difficulty things with work to do with IIIF. You always have to begin with an explanation of what IIIF is, and it'll be great when you reach the point where actually people just accept that. You can actually get on with the meat of the work that you're doing. But yes, it's good to stop and think about that.
I have a question for Tom or any of the chairs, but I think, Tom, you might be able to answer this. When do we anticipate publishing or circulating something? Like not 12 months from now, not 1 month from now. Any guesses?
Well, Ben, I can, others may also want to jump in on this. I can say we cleverly use this workshop as a forcing function to go from discussions in the community group to airing some. So to some degree, I think that's done. I think our sense is also that what we've done is a preliminary step or just one step, and there's going to be valuable iterations. Did we ask the right questions? Do we have the right features? What sort of artifacts would be most useful? So I think to some degree it's already published, and a good thing for the group to consider, both the working group, the community group, but also the wider community, is what would be most useful in terms of carrying the artifacts and the exercises we've done today forward, which is almost the exact same question I just posed in chat, which is what do people think about the checklist and the list of features that Arcadia demoed, and also the checklist that Ben walked us through. Do people see value in that? How would you use it? Where would you like to see it go from here?
Can we bring that slide back up also? Somebody who can share their screen.
It's one of the 70 tabs I have. Oh, I'm sorry, 157 tabs I have open, but does someone have it handy?
I'm afraid I don't. Arcadia, perhaps?
You mean the feature list? Ah.
Nope, there we go. Richard's got us.
So one thing that came up yesterday was badging. So it would be interesting to think about this list as a first step toward merging these ideas. That something like going through this list successfully would, yeah, get you some badge that says, yes, we're IIIF compliant to this point.
Yeah, sort of a IIIF bronze, silver, gold type thing. Though I do wonder, sort of, as Ben and Joe were discussing earlier in the conversation, how much that's sort of dictating the path that implementers or institutions would need to follow down, rather than sort of the organic development that we've seen thus far.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was sort of shorthanding it because there's definitely discussion in the badging yesterday about what's good and bad about badges. They have their flaws. And I don't think in its current form, it just sort of duct taping these ideas together would not work. But this list might be a starting point for thinking about how to get to something like a badge, or I'm trying to come up with a better word. The metaphor of accessibility came out yesterday, again, so for people to be able to talk about what they are aiming at, or what their policy is, that this is their policy as they're heading toward this kind of framework. There would need to be a more robust framework and a more nuanced framework maybe, but still it's as a starting point.
I'm sorry I didn't manage to get to the badge meeting yesterday, but I was wondering, given the conversation that's happened, is there a way of sort of designing a badge that doesn't necessarily have bronze, silver, gold, but almost has a more evolutionary process where you can have lots of different versions of it depending on which features you've chosen, but it's always clear sort of the extent of what features have been included. So that you sort of, the simplest one would be a grid where squares get filled in when you hit a certain feature, but obviously you can have, a more completely filled in grid with a different feature list than someone else. So there's not one path to hit almost completely filled in grid, but something a lot prettier or maybe easier than that.
Joe, that immediately threw into my mind the Creative Commons kind of model, where it's not so much a checklist, but it's just an indicator, right? It's like a little dashboard that says these are the features you can expect or find here. So that's an interesting one. Hadn't thought about that model, but now it's kind of groups of features could be represented by a single icon, and then people would self-present just like most other, self-assess and self-present what they are. It's not compliance, but it's highlighting features.
Yeah, Ben, I think one thing that's come up before and we need to be careful of is to be descriptive rather than prescriptive. There was an earlier discussion about standardization. If we had standardized on the IIIF badge, like you have to click and get a JSON manifest, which would have been the best practice 3 years ago, I think we would have done a big disservice to human users. And it was a good thing that we didn't prescribe that this is what a standard is then, because I think we're seeing better patterns now. So some sort of checkerboard or checkboxes, or has been describing this is what we're doing, would be potentially quite valuable to people. Say we're this type of system and we have these type of features supporting those types of interactions. Because I think we're clearly seeing some clustering and some patterns, right? And there's some really great interactions that are emerging just recently. So I could see that developing coming out of this community group over the next 3 to 6 months. I think we could really produce some of those. But we have lots of things, recipes, badges, patches, whatever you want to call it.
That would be really useful for a circumstance that came up in the review portion of this presentation. So one of the sites I reviewed was a wax site, and wax is by nature lightweight, minimal computing, and nobody building a wax site wants to buff out their labor by also then having to create an about IIIF page and here's my API. It's just a wax site, but a faceted link of some sort that goes to a canonical representation of what that wax site does and implements would be incredibly useful, and let that wax site connect to the larger ecosystem, let people who are interested in that learn more about it. But if you're just there to read and consume the scholarly communication in that way, then great. The wax people don't have to build that all themselves.
I think that feeds in a bit to Richard Palmer's question in the chat, concerning whether if IIIF compliant ought to be more detailed, if there could be variation within collection, or what limits lies to the IIIF use, as different items have different copyright statuses.
Well, just jumping in on that comment, if Richard, if you don't want to jump in and describe that, I think it goes back to Tom's point about proscriptive rather than descriptive, right? Compliance is proscriptive, and other than a baseline level of compliance, which is really technical at this point, should compliance extend beyond that? Maybe not, right? Because there's still plenty of room for experimentation and trying out new patterns of interaction and design and etc.
Maria's posted a question on the chat, which I don't believe it's a naive question at all, but would it not be beneficial to get a way to tell browsers that the content, images, AV, 3D, etc., is IIIF compliant, so that the user can limit search in the browser to IIIF content, a little like the search for wiki-ets brings up a Wikipedia result for entry-ets. I would have no idea about how we would go about getting the browser to do that, but maybe someone with a bit more development expertise might have some ideas. Anyone?
Is this a question about searching in a search engine in the browser or within a page or discovery system?
I'm not sure. Maria, could you perhaps clarify?
I was thinking in the browser itself, finding IIIF content via the browser.
Yeah, I'm curious too if there's been any discussion about that, like level of integration with the larger World Wide Web, I suppose we might say.
I think if we were to make that work, you'd need some sort of global index of IIIF resources, which is something we've kind of tried to steer away with. But I'd be interested to hear about Trip's comment about DuckDuckGo, whether that might be one way of doing it.
Yeah, that's a pretty half-baked statement. just me knowing that DuckDuckGo has these sort of extensions implemented. I don't know how you get it, as you say, Glenn. Like, I don't know how DuckDuckGo would then know what it's looking for. I just know that as a general thing, I see that they are open to these. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the Mycroft project too, although am I the only one who cares about the old Mycroft project? Like, there have been these things, but unlike Alta Vista, Yahoo, etc., they've never gone that next step in my experience. So like, Maria, I'm not sure where you're doing that wiki filtering. I didn't even know about that. I'm not sure where I would do that.
Just to jump in, there are some more or less cross search engine shortcuts that go back to early days. Alta Vista had nested logic, Boolean logic, that got a little filtered out, but you can do things like cite IIIF.io and then something from there. DuckDuckGo has their own shortcuts, and that would be one of the things to see if we could establish some shortcuts, ideally across search engine, but it would be good to experiment with someone like DuckDuckGo. Where you'd get the information, Glenn's point, maybe that's part of the registry idea.
Can we just get, David, I read your comment about basically something missing, and I don't have the full 40 features in my mind, but this one seems like a new one. Can you just, is there an example that you have of somewhere that does this?
Part of this is coming from some work we did on a toy around importing IIIF resources into Animal Crossing across multiple institutions. And the hardest part of that project was helping someone understand how to get that content into a third-party tool. You know, we talked a little bit about a Zotero-like thing. I know that it is, you find the manifest URL some way, and that is the entry point into reusing that content in third-party applications. But that's a really hard thing to conceptually explain to people who aren't used to thinking of URLs as identifiers to content. It's also, like, the drag and drop is a really elegant implementation, but it's really hard to explain to people that, you know, that's just not a well enough established pattern that you drag images from here to here and it does magic things. But I think if a lot of here really helps me work within my personal ecosystem with a IIIF resource. But if I want to use that IIIF resource in other ecosystems, how do I help someone understand how to do that?
I think there's some excellent food for thought here, and I think perhaps in our next half-hour break and conference session, it might make sense to sort of keep this chat going. But just so that we give Paola a chance to sort of sum up where we've been and where we hope to be going for a final kind of closing. I recognize that'll put us just a bit over time. Paola, can we hand it over to you?
Paula, you're muted.
Ah, my microphone. Sorry, so sorry for this. It's time for me. It's in Italy, it's 8:30 p.m. So it was a very tired days, but I'm so happy with our workshop. And again, on behalf of the co-chair of the group, I would like to thank the colleagues who have presenting in this workshop, as well as all of you for your participation. I have appreciated a lot the discussion, the brilliant discussion we had. And I think also that the items in the agenda have demonstrated the state of the art of the preliminary actions and the discussion that are actively taking place in our community group. And if I may refer again to the metaphorical image of the needle in the haystack I previously mentioned, I would say that at this stage, we are thinking about how to plan the discovery while still sitting and still remaining in this metaphorical domain. Another famous quote comes to my mind, this time a quote attributed to Albert Einstein, which says, most people stop looking when they find the proverbial needle in the haystack. I would continue looking to see if there were other needles. So this is therefore a wish that I would like to address to all of us in a nutshell, that our research on discovery convenience can progress and be fruitful for the benefit of the extended IIIF community. And I hope you will join us again in the community call or through the Slack in order to go on this discussion. So I think I can say, I can add my goodbye, and again, wish you happy winter holidays and also a new year without any worries about the pandemic, and that the pandemic will soon become just a sad experience pertaining to the past. So thank you very much again, and have a nice morning, evening, good night. Ciao.
Ciao.